On the night of March 7th, 1946, the 18th Annual Academy Awards were hosted from the Grauman's Chinese Theatre in Hollywood. What stole the show that evening was Michael Curtiz's powerhouse drama, Mildred Pierce. The film snapped up Best Picture, and Joan Crawford, who played the titular Mildred, won Best Actress. She accepted the award from her bed as she was unable to attend due to an alleged bout of pneumonia. The film follows Mildred as she struggles to create a life for herself and her daughters, all the while having men, and even her eldest child, attempt to tear her apart emotionally and physically. The film was able to resonate with audiences at the time, as it was able to bring a discussion to the battle that waged within homes. Men returning home from the war were expecting to pick up where they left off, and women were empowered through their newfound workload as part of the war effort, and they did not want to give it up, thus creating a battle of who would be the breadwinner. What Mildred Pierce was able to do was depict the American dream through female eyes and show struggles of single parenthood. But there's another film from this year. Actually, no. There's another character from this year that I believe resonates with viewers more than Joan Crawford's Mildred Pierce, and that is of Vera in Detour. Vera becomes a combination of Mildred Pierce's two central characters. Vera is able to combine the desperation and drive of Mildred with the cold ruthlessness of Vida, thus creating a figure who audiences both laud and hate at the same time. However, what stands Vera apart from these other characters is how real she feels. With Mildred Pierce, the characters are meant to be struggling, but they have a nice house, nice clothes, lovely things, and they're all well groomed. But with Detour, Vera has no home, or at least no known home anyway. Her clothes are plain, her hair is unkempt, and she presents herself in a generally dishevelled fashion. Although these characters are similar in their goals, they couldn't be further apart in appearance. With this adjustment to Vera's appearance, it makes you empathise with her more. It makes you understand her troubles. I honestly don't think that Vera could have been performed by anyone other than Anne Savage. She's able to bring to life this character in such a visceral nature that it sticks with you as a viewer. In this film, Anne Savage is able to mesmerise audiences, which always left me wondering, why isn't she discussed more amongst her contemporaries? What I want to do is look back at the life and career of Anne to show that there is a lot more to her than just Detour. Born February 19th, 1921 in Columbia, South Carolina, under the name Bernice Maxine Leon, Anne Savage spent her first few years moving between military bases as her father served in the United States Army. However, her dad passed away when she was aged 4, and after this she moved with her mother to Los Angeles, where her mum supported them by becoming a jewellery trader. Anne trained to become an actress from a young age at the Max Reinhardt School of Acting. This is where she met her last husband, Bert DeArmond. The two were eventually married in 1945 until Bert's death in 1969. At age 17, she had her first screen role, where she was an extra in MGM's production of The Great Waltz. This was also accompanied by a screen test with the company, however, it didn't work out. Over the next few years, she continued to study under Reinhardt, and it was during this time where she changed her name from Bernice to Anne. In the early 1940s, Fox offered her a screen test, however she no-showed that under the knowledge that the studio already had a legion of young blondes at their disposal. Her luck soon turned, however, as she was recruited via Columbia after a Reinhardt School production of Golden Boy. It was at Columbia where Anne made the majority of her films, and she worked there between 1943 and 1945. Her first few roles with Columbia was that of supporting cast or uncredited extra work in films such as The More the Merrier and Dangerous Blondes, the latter seeing her have a minor speaking role before being killed off screen. One of her first major roles came in Saddles and Sagebrush, a part of Russell Hayden's Lucky series of films. Anne plays Anne Parker, a coincidence, I'm sure, the daughter of a rancher in the midst of being kicked off their land by a local gang. Her first couple of scenes are really interesting, as the gang attack their ranch, and her, along with her father, are able to fend them off with guns. The second scene shows her helping her father after he was shot by a member of the gang. She is outspoken towards the men, and no one objects to her.
There isn't a man among you with courage enough to fight Savin. My father warned you that you had to fight or eat out of his hand. You've seen his killers sweep down on us like vultures, and you've let him do it, afraid of his shadow.
Nice speech, sister.
These scenes paint her to be a powerful, strong-willed woman, but her character takes a complete 180 after this. Hayden's Lucky begins to help them, which puts him in the forefront of the action and reduces Anne to little more than a helper, preparing meals for the men and being absent for any of the action. The culmination of the film sees Anne taken hostage by the gang leader, and Lucky having to save her. In the fight, she looks on as though helpless, which is a complete contrast to the character we are privy to in the beginning. She goes from a woman ready and willing to defend her home to a hapless blonde by the end of it. They were two completely different people. What I find equally baffling about this is that she is literally the only woman on the screen. There aren't even any in background shots. What I find with this film is that all the characters, not only Anne, but villains and heroes alike, are there to put over Lucky as this unstoppable force, as it is a Russell Hayden star vehicle. This was pretty close to many of her other roles at the time. For instance, she's supporting Bill in films such as Ever Since Venus, a Jungle Jim film Pygmy Island, Scared Stiff, and even another Russell Hayden film, The Last Horseman. Although she is there in a supporting role to her fellow male co-stars, she is still able to shine in these. Anne's charisma pulls through, and she is able to captivate you as a viewer.
But let me tell you, it's a magic preparation. And when you take the girl in your...
Well, of all the nerve. I've never heard it.
The best way I can describe her work throughout these films is that she is the light in the darkness. The quality of these films range from okay to not great, but what remains a constant throughout is Anne's ability to make the most of every role she is given. And she was well aware of the quality of these films, stating in the 1980s, "They were mindless. The actresses were just scenery. The stories all revolved around the male actors. They really had the choice roles." Although the aforementioned films show that she was able to pull off a wide range of supporting characters, the next few roles that Anne was cast in prove where her strengths lie, and that is of playing the villain. These roles come around when she worked for PRC. This was after her time at Columbia and a brief stint with Paramount. The first film was the 1945 thriller Apology for Murder. The film's narrative echoes that of Double Indemnity from the year prior. Anne plays Toni Kirkland, the wife of an older businessman who coaxes her lover into killing her husband for a large inheritance. Although the film lacks a lot of the nuance and the style of Double Indemnity, with its rushed 65-minute runtime, her character is presented in a rather cold fashion, leeching from one person to another and dropping them once she has got what she wanted. In the final sequence, she is shot and killed by her lover after she shoots him, just like Double Indemnity. However, with this, Toni is shot in the back as she's fleeing from him, rather than being shot whilst in a loving embrace. It feels more like an execution than the putting down of Barbara Stanwyck's character, Phyllis, in Double Indemnity. With this, along with her desperate pleading before she runs away, creates a sympathy for her character that I don't believe the filmmakers wanted. Whether it was through misunderstanding of the prior film, or just lack of thought, I don't know. But yet again, with this scene, the character that Anne Savage portrays feels like two separate entities. And I can't put the blame on Anne. The problems seem to lie with the production, as with this film she brings a gravitas and charisma to the production that is solely lacking. She can stand alone as a separate entity from Stanwyck's iconic portrayal of Phyllis Dietrichson, even though the film itself will forever be in the shadow of Double Indemnity. With her character's desperate nature and sheer disregard for others, Anne showed clear glimpses of her most iconic role. She was becoming Detour's Vera. Now, I've already covered Detour, as well as Anne's performance in it, extensively in one of my previous videos. It should be in the top right hand corner if you wanted to check it out. But I can't talk about Anne Savage in any great detail without at least glossing over her portrayal of the iconic Vera. Detour felt like a different kind of film to any of Anne's previous, and this could be down to a number of reasons. Firstly, the director, Edgar G. Ulmer, may play a big factor in this, as he was a competent filmmaker that had a proven track record with works such as 1934's The Black Cat. So he might have been able to work with Anne to accentuate the positives in her performances. Another reason has to be the scripting and characterization of Vera herself. It was a character with a lot more depth and direction than any of her previous. The film stars Tom Neal, who plays Al. The two also worked together on Klondike Kate, The Unwritten Code, and Two Man Submarine. Anne was not a fan of Tom on a professional level, as she found him to be an aggressive man. Al is travelling to Los Angeles to reunite with his fiancée, but on the way there, the man he is hitchhiking with dies. This leads to Vera running into him and blackmailing him. Vera does not appear until after the 30-minute mark, but this is only a positive. Anne is able to steal every scene she is in. The film makes a strong improvement once she is on the screen, as she is a stronger performer than Tom Neal, and her character is more interesting also. Just like her character from Apology for Murder, she's desperate and willing to do whatever it takes to improve her situation.
$1,850. That dirty crook.
Anne is able to give something more to the character. Vera is a constant aggressor, forever sparking conflict with Al, but once she drinks, she lowers her guard. She tries to talk with Al, and even get intimate with him. This could be a nod to her past, that she may be lonely, or she may even have abandonment issues, but ultimately, that aspect of Vera is left a mystery, which makes her all the more intriguing. There is no doubt that this is Anne's most iconic role, even to the extent that people didn't recognise her at screenings, due to her naturally blonde hair. Vera's exit is also iconic. She threatens to call the police on Al, but ends up being strangled by the phone cord. It feels true to form that a woman with such vigour would be disposed of, as she's too bold for this male-centric world, making her feel just as much a sympathetic figure as a villain. These sentiments seem to be echoed even in today's culture with the 2020 film Promising Young Woman, and how the protagonist in that film meets her unfortunate end. This film was not the only one that seems to derive inspiration from Vera, as many critics have cited the performance as being ahead of its time, but I'd go one step further with this, and say that Anne Savage bridged the gap between representation of women throughout the studio system era and how women have been represented in more recent years. I think this performance helped the rise of the bunny boiler thrillers that began in the 70s and 80s. I also think the careers of certain actresses such as Helena Bonham Carter would have been aided by this film. But ultimately, I think what Detour showed is that a woman didn't have to be dressed immaculately to appear attractive and powerful. After Detour, Anne's film career began to dry up. She made a western named Renegade Girl, where she is embroiled in a blood feud with a Native American over the killing of her brother. The film is an interesting companion to Stagecoach and Saddlebrush due to the different ways in which each film treat her as a character, but otherwise it is a nice little action film that has Anne in the lead. Other than this, very little of note came her way. Throughout the World War II era, Anne was a vehement seller of war bonds. She also became a popular pin-up model around this time and performed for the troops on multiple occasions. By the 1950s, Anne had transitioned into television performances, with roles on shows such as City Detective, Fireside Theatre, and Gangbusters, where she reunited on screen once again with Tom Neal. After her husband's death in 1969, Anne became a licensed pilot, and throughout the 1980s and 1990s, she made rare appearances in film and television, such as a role on an episode of Saved by the Bell. Anne would frequent screenings and festivals, but otherwise kept out of the media until the release of My Winnipeg. My Winnipeg is a 2007 experimental documentary by Guy Maddin, which reenacts historical moments of the city, along with aspects of the filmmaker's upbringing. Anne was cast as Maddin's mother, an interesting choice after Savage's decades of on-screen inactivity. But a quick look into Maddin's filmography shows that his inspiration lies heavily in the 1920s through to the 1940s era of Hollywood. Anne's portrayal of Mother felt similar to that of what we had seen before, but also different. There were still glimpses of Vera in her stern dictatorship, but elements of a warmer and more caring character lay underneath this.
Are you comfortable now?
Mostly, I guess I am.
Me too.
That Freezy wrapper looks sticky.
I don't mind. I don't mind.
She was the same woman we had seen some 60 years prior, but her presence strikes a different chord with the viewer. Her strong gaze that once paralysed viewers in Detour was back once again, but instead of desperation and anger in her eyes, there's a more looming and imposing threat. Anne had become what she was portraying, a stronger, more wiser figure than she had played before. Her movements and her dialogue were less, because Anne, along with Maddin, knew that less is more, and that by showing restraint in the presentation of her character, it would only heighten her villainy, as well as creating a sense of sympathy for the character, as she was only trying to care for her children. Maddin himself put it best when he said, "These were days lived completely under the dominion of a fearsome maternal titan. Years trembled out beneath the scented fist of my gorgeous and glamorous dictatorship, and I knew there was only one person alive, who ever lived, who could play her role. Anne Savage." On Christmas Day 2008, Anne Savage passed away after multiple stroke complications. She was 87. She was buried alongside her husband and her effects were dedicated to the University of Texas. With the cult status that Detour achieved and the notoriety she got with My Winnipeg, Anne became an iconic figure before her death, something which many B-movie stars didn't receive. With all this in mind, it still leaves me wondering why she didn't achieve greater acclaim in her younger years. I suppose that could be down to many factors. Maybe it was down to the people that she worked with, as both Tom Neal and Edgar Ulmer had been exiled from major studios after disputes with big producers. It may also be down to what she wasn't willing to do. There were reports that Savage rebuffed sexual advances from Columbia exec Harry Cohn, which proves how far back that practice had gone on for, with actors still being pressured into situations such as this for a chance at bigger roles. But it also could be down to how she presented herself. In Detour, she shows herself to be dishevelled, and with executives wanting glamorous women at the time, maybe Anne was overlooked. All of this is just a theory, but I'm trying to pose the question that maybe Detour was the reason her opportunities dried up. It would have been the ultimate irony that the role she was praised for so heavily was the actual reason her career plummeted. However, I don't think that's the case. I think many of her projects at Columbia were not up to par, and Detour was too late for her, as many producers had already made their decision on her. Anne sadly became one of the many chewed up and spat out by the studio system. But whatever production she was in, Anne was able to make the most of it. She felt convincing and captivating in every role. I think a talent such as hers would have thrived in the landscape of today, as there seems to be more and more opportunities for talented actors to show what they can do. People are not just limited to big films anymore, and that was the unfortunate reason for Anne's Hollywood downfall. Her performance in Detour proved that she should be able to stand with her contemporaries and be seen as the strong actress that she is. So whenever you think of old Hollywood, and you think of classic film noir, think of Anne Savage too. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think of Anne's work, and which films you liked her in. And please consider liking and subscribing, it really does help. Oh, and if anyone knows where I can find a copy of The Unwritten Code and Two Man Submarine, let me know, because I can't find it. Thanks.
I'm a savage, yeah. Classy, bougie, ratchet, yeah. Sassy, moody, nasty, yeah. Hacking.